The first time Delia Keene pulled a chair right next to mine, not across the table, not at the empty workstation beside me, directly next to mine, close enough that her sleeve brushed my arm, I forgot the password I'd used every single day for 2 years. I'm Emmett Park, 28, data analyst at a fintech startup called ClearPath in Vancouver. We build tools that help small business owners manage cash flow without needing a finance degree to understand what was happening to their money. It's good work, honest work, the kind of work I could explain to my parents without watching their eyes glaze over halfway through. I had been quietly, carefully crushing on Delia for 7 months. It was disciplined, it was useless, and it was absolutely not something I planned to act on. She joined ClearPath the previous spring as a UX researcher. Her job was to figure out why real people couldn't figure out our product. She was 26, originally from Winnipeg, with the particular quality of someone who had survived serious winters and come out the other side with dry humor and zero patience for fuss. She wore her dark hair up most days, came in with coffee from the Tim Hortons on Granville because she said the place on Hastings made hers wrong every single time, and she had a habit of standing just slightly closer than necessary when she was explaining something she cared about. The first time she did it, I thought it was accidental. By the fourth time, I understood it was just how she moved through the world. I had a rule. Don't assume. I'd made that mistake once before, at my last job in Calgary. I was 24, and convinced a develop named Petra was interested in me because she kept texting me links to things she thought were funny. She wasn't. She was just funny. She was kind about the conversation where I misread everything. I was not. For 6 weeks afterward, people in the office group chat called me Cupid every time I spoke to a woman, and I had learned to live in my own skin again eventually. But the lesson stuck hard. So, don't assume. Don't stare. Don't let her catch you calculating the distance between her hand and your keyboard. Delia made all of that very difficult. She came to my workstation on a Tuesday morning in November with her laptop tucked under one arm and her Tim Hortons cup, leaving a ring on my desk before she'd even sat down. "Your dashboard retention graph is lying to you," she said. I looked up from my screen. "Good morning. The spike in week 3 isn't organic. It's the free trial expiry forcing a decision. You're reading engagement when you should be reading panic." She turned my monitor slightly toward her without asking. "See?" I saw. She was right. I also registered that she had pulled my chair a few centimeters in her direction without noticing, which meant we were now close enough for me to understand that her shampoo smelled like cedar and something citrusy. I focused very aggressively on the graph. "That's going to change the entire Q4 narrative," I said. "Better to know now." She straightened and took a sip of my coffee. I hadn't offered any. She made a face and handed it back. "Yours is terrible, by the way." "It's a dark roast. It's a coping mechanism in a paper cup. You came to my desk to insult my beverage. I came to save your numbers from a bad story. The beverage was just sitting there." She picked up her own cup. "Fix the week 3 annotation before the Thursday meeting, or Heather will ask questions you can't answer without admitting the spike was artificial." I tried not to smile, failed. That was the core of the problem. Delia didn't just make me forget passwords. She made the work feel like a puzzle someone else was also interested in solving. She noticed things, not just in product flows but about people. She once pointed out, without being asked, that our new junior analyst was clearly drowning and suggested we ask our CEO to lighten his onboarding load before he quit and took our 3 weeks of training with him. She argued a case for user privacy in a team meeting until the head of growth backed down, which I heard afterward had never happened before. She remembered that I kept Advil in my left desk drawer and once left a glass of water beside my keyboard with a sticky note. "Your neck looks like it's having a worse day than you are. Drink this." I noticed that she twisted the silver bracelet on her left wrist when she was thinking hard. I knew it was from her grandmother because she'd mentioned it once at a team lunch, offhand, not to anyone in particular. She hadn't been telling me specifically. I had just been listening. That was the other problem. I had been paying quiet, careful attention to her for 7 months and had done nothing with it, except get better at pretending I hadn't. She made that strategy useless by approximately 10:47 on a Wednesday. We'd moved to the small boardroom by the windows. She was walking me through a redesigned onboarding flow on her tablet, wanted my data to validate whether her hypothesis matched actual user behavior. She sat beside me instead of across the table. I asked why. "I'm not going to narrate a screen at you from across the room like we're in a job interview," she said. "What are we in then?" She glanced at me sideways. Collaboration. We worked through it. The flow was clean. She'd taken something that looked like a form and made it feel like a conversation. I told her that. She set the tablet down. She looked at me, not the quick check of someone confirming they've been heard. She actually looked. The November rain tapped the window behind us. The coffee machine in the kitchen beeped twice. "Careful," she said quietly. My voice came out lower than I planned. "Of what?" "Saying things like that, like you mean them." There was a line between us on the boardroom table. We both felt it. Neither of us crossed it. Then Pierce knocked on the glass door holding his laptop and an expression that meant he was about to ruin something. "Hey, sorry, Heather needs you both. Right now." Delia leaned back. I studied the retention graph like it owed me money. Heather Bain, our CEO, swept into the main boardroom 3 minutes later with 2 folders and the focused energy of a person who had given up on slow news. "Demo day is Friday," she said. "Tobias has mono." Delia set her coffee down slowly. Tobias, who was presenting the product story. "Unless we have another Tobias in storage somewhere, yes." Heather set a folder in front of each of us. "You built the data layer. She built the experience layer. Together you make the strongest case for what we've built. You're co-presenting." I should have been thinking about the presentation. Our Series A demo was to 4 investor groups. If it went well, ClearPath could stop pretending that the office snack budget was a deliberate leadership choice. Instead, all I could think was that Delia and I would be standing side by side in front of serious money for 40 minutes, pretending the last 7 months hadn't been a careful accumulation of almost. Delia recovered first. "Fine, but Emmett needs a better blazer." I looked down. "I'm wearing a blazer." "You're wearing what a blazer would look like if it had given up on itself." Heather blinked. "I'm going to walk away now." Pierce, hovering in the doorway, made a sound like a man trying very hard not to laugh. We spent the afternoon in the sample room off the back hallway, where old branded swag and spare equipment went to wait out their existence. Delia found a navy blazer on the back of a shelving unit, shook it out, and held it against my shoulders. "Better," she said, like she was solving a problem. "You do this for all your coworkers?" "Just the ones who forget how to breathe when I sit next to them." I went very still. She stepped closer to adjust the collar. Her fingers rested near my shoulder. Not accidental, not exactly innocent. "Delia," I said. Her hands paused. I was going to say something honest. Not everything. Not a full confession beside a box of discontinued, ClearPath branded tote bags. Just enough. Something like, "I don't think you're just being collegial, and I'd like to know if I'm reading this right." Then my phone buzzed on the shelf behind us. Unknown number. We both glanced at it. The message read, "She's flying to Toronto right after the demo. Thought you should know." I stared at the screen until the words stopped moving. She's flying to Toronto right after the demo. My chest did something unhelpful and inconvenient. "Who was that?" she asked. I turned the phone face down. Wrong number. She looked at me the way she looked at a dashboard that wasn't adding up. "Okay," she said. She didn't push. I spent the rest of the afternoon not being able to look at her the same way. By 4 o'clock, the rumor had gotten around the office that Delia and I were already a couple and had been for a while. Pierce had apparently interpreted our extended time in the sample room as something other than an inventory of surplus blazers. Delia handled it with a calm I could not match. "We're not," she told Pierce in the kitchen, pouring hot water for her tea. "But I appreciate the vote of confidence. The way you two were in the boardroom this morning. We were reviewing data. Sure, it just looked like something else. Most things do if you're already looking for it." Pierce retreated. I was by the fridge, pretending to read the community board. Delia carried her mug past me and said under her breath, "You're terrible at pretending you weren't listening." I was reading the fire safety notice. You were facing the wrong wall. She walked back to her desk. I stayed alone in the kitchen with the kettle, still steaming, and the question, from that text, sitting in my chest, where I couldn't reach it. At 6:15, the office emptied in the way Vancouver offices do in November. When the sky goes dark at 4, and everyone files onto the SkyTrain and decides the evening belongs to them. I was still at my desk running projections when Delia appeared with her coat on and 2 paper cups. "Walk with me," she said. She set one in front of me. "That one is actual coffee from the good place. Don't make it weird." I made it weird by saying nothing for almost a full block. We ended up at the food trucks near the south side of False Creek. The rain had softened to that specific Vancouver mist that locals refuse to call rain and tourists treat like a weather emergency. White string lights over the eating area. Delia ordered a veggie wrap. I got poutine because it was cold and I was anxious, and I am Canadian in ways I do not always have to explain. She sat across from me at a metal picnic table under a heat lamp. The creek caught the city lights and scattered them across the water. "You've been quiet," she said. "I'm usually quiet. Not this quiet." That text, it wasn't a wrong number. It wasn't a question. I took my phone out and slid it across the table. She read the message. Her expression changed, surprise first, then something carefully held. She handed the phone back. "So," I said, "are you?" "Am I what?" "Going to Toronto." "That's complicated." "That's not a no." "No," she said, "it's not a no." I nodded and assembled my voice into something that resembled calm. "Big opportunity?" "A UX director role at a firm there. Real budget, real scope." "That's good." "You don't look like you think it's good." "I think it's good for you." I put my phone away. I just wasn't expecting it. "They want an answer by Friday, after the demo." Of course they did. The heat lamp buzzed above us. Somewhere on the seawall, a dog was barking at something it had decided was completely unacceptable. Delia was quiet. Then she reached across the table and set her hand over mine. Not a joke, not an accident. Just her hand, warm in the cold, and my entire nervous system concluding it was the most significant thing that had happened to me in years. "Emmet," she said. "Yeah. I notice you. I wanted you to know that. More than I probably should." I turned my hand and held hers properly. "Then why does this feel like a goodbye?" Her thumb moved once across my hand. "Because I don't know yet whether staying or going is the right answer. And I didn't want to. I didn't want to do anything about the noticing until I knew." I looked at her across the small table. The city moved around us. "I notice you too," I said. "I've been trying not to for 7 months." Her mouth curved just slightly. "I know." "Is it that obvious?" "Only to me." She paused. "You remembered my grandmother's name. One sentence. Team lunch in October." I didn't answer. "That's not a complaint," she said. Her phone lit up between us. She glanced at it, and I caught the name before she turned it over. Alec. "Who's Alec?" I asked. Something moved through her face. "Old boss." "From Toronto?" "From here, actually. He's consulting with the firm that's recruiting me. And he's texting you at 6:30 on a Wednesday." She looked at her cup. "He does that." I waited. "We should head back," she said. "Delia." She looked at me. Real question. "Is there something I should know?" The heat lamp hummed. The city moved. She looked at the water for a moment, then, "Not tonight. I'll tell you everything, I promise. But not tonight. Tonight I just want to finish eating and let you walk me to the station." I let it go. Some things you can feel are real, before you know exactly what they are. We stayed another 40 minutes and talked about everything except demos and Toronto and whoever Alec was. She told me about her grandmother, the bracelet, Winnipeg, a woman who had apparently never once been impressed by anyone's credentials and found that freeing. I told her about my youth hockey career, which ended at 11 when I skated directly into the boards during the first period of a game my entire extended family had attended. She laughed so fully that the people at the next table looked over. Walking to the station, she slipped her hand into mine like she'd done it 100 times before. At the turnstile, she stopped. "Don't disappear into your head tonight," she said. Text me if you're going to spiral. I don't spiral. Emet, you spiral. You go quiet and then you run numbers on things that aren't problems yet. That's called analysis. That's called anxiety with a spreadsheet. She squeezed my hand once. Text me. Then she went through the turnstile, and I stood there under the fluorescent station lights, feeling like something had shifted without either of us officially deciding it had. My phone buzzed on the walk home. Unknown number again. This time, ask Delia what happened at Meridian before you trust her with this pitch. I stopped in the middle of the Canby Bridge and read it twice. Meridian was her previous agency. She'd mentioned it the way people mention the place before the current place. Not often, without much detail. I turned around and walked back. Her building was glass and concrete, the kind that went up fast in the years Vancouver real estate convinced itself it had no ceiling. I buzzed her apartment before I could think my way out of it. Emet? I got another text. A pause. The door clicked open. She met me in the lobby in socks and a university sweatshirt, her hair down. That was the thing that got me. Not the hour or the cold I'd brought in with me, but her hair loose around her shoulders and the way she looked at my face and understood immediately that something had happened. She read the message. The color didn't leave her face. It went somewhere interior. Come up, she said. Her apartment was warm and a little crowded in the way of someone who had too many ideas and not enough walls. Sketches pinned above her desk. A monstera taking over one corner. A French press on the counter and a half-eaten granola bar beside her open laptop. It suited her completely, which was somehow worse. She didn't offer tea. She stood at the window, looking out at the rain. Meridian, I said. Yes. Tell me. She looked at the glass for a moment. I led a UX research project there for a financial wellness app. We collected sensitive data, spending patterns, savings habits, debt loads, really personal stuff. Users had consented to share it anonymously for product improvement. She paused. Alec was the engagement lead. He wanted to sell an aggregated version of the dataset to a third-party advertiser, a credit card company. That's a PIPEDIA violation. That's exactly what I said. She turned to look at me. He said I was being dramatic, that the data was aggregated, anonymized, that it would hold up. I said the consent language didn't cover commercial resale, and we'd be in breach of what users had actually agreed to. Were you right? Yes. I escalated it directly to the client nonprofit and told them what was being planned. They terminated the contract with our agency. She folded her arms. Alec told everyone I'd gone rogue, that I'd cost the agency a significant contract because I was too rigid to understand commercial realities. He was very measured about it. He didn't use emotional language. He used words like inflexible. Unable to see the full picture, he framed it as a concern about my professional judgment. I felt something tighten in my chest. He weaponized calm. He was very good at it. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself. It followed me. Reference checks, side conversations. Part of why I moved cities. A pause. The firm in Toronto, he's consulting there now. He found the role for me. And he's texting you about me. I didn't ask him to. I know you didn't. I said it simply because it was true. I crossed the room. She didn't step back. Delia, I believe you. She looked at me like that wasn't what she'd expected. You don't want more information? I want considerably more information about this man. But I don't need his version before I believe yours. Her eyes went bright for a second. She blinked it back. Don't be decent about it. It's inconvenient. I'll try to do worse. Something came out of her that was almost a laugh. Then she leaned forward and put her forehead against my shoulder, and I put my arms around her, and that was more intimate than everything that had come before it. Her breathing slowed. I'm scared, she said into my shoulder. Not of him, of all of it, the demo, the choice, letting things matter and having them go sideways anyway. I pressed my cheek to her hair. Then we make tomorrow loud enough to drown out everything he's already put in your head. She leaned back to look at me. You realize you actually have to be good at this presentation. I'm always good at presentations. You use too many decimal places. I use the correct number of decimal places. 2 decimal places tells a story. 4 starts an argument. I disagree, but I'll note it. She laughed, real and full, and the sound of it filled her small, warm apartment, and I thought, I would like to hear that for a long time. I stayed another hour. We rebuilt the demo from the inside, her framing the human story, me tightening the data to support it without burying anyone. We sat on her couch and argued about slide order in the specific, comfortable way of people who already trust each other's instincts. At 11, she walked me to the door. No anxiety cave tonight, she said. I don't have an anxiety cave. Emmet, you have a whole anxiety cave. It has a whiteboard. Get some sleep. She looked at me. Then she reached up, one hand on the front of my jacket, and kissed me. Brief and certain, the kind that isn't asking a question because both people already know the answer. That's for after we win tomorrow, she said. And if we don't win, we're going to win. She stepped back. Good night. I walked home in the cold Vancouver mist and did not for once spiral. She arrived the next morning 7 minutes after I did, wearing a dark blazer over a rust-colored top, her hair down. She stopped at my desk, looked me over, nodded once. You'll do. She set a Tim Hortons cup in front of me. From the good location, you'll need that. Heather was already in the main boardroom managing 4 video panels, a physical whiteboard, and Pierce, who kept offering opinions nobody had asked for. 3 investor groups joined remotely. Lakeview Capital sent 2 partners in person. And standing beside the Lakeview partners, already seated, holding coffee, was a man I didn't recognize. Delia stopped in the doorway. He was mid-40s, composed in the specific way of people who had learned to weaponize pleasantness, the kind of calm that arrived pre-sharpened. He looked up and smiled broadly. Delia, what a coincidence. It was not a coincidence. His name was Alec Drummond. He was consulting with Lakeview on their tech portfolio and had, apparently, joined the meeting late. Heather introduced everyone. Delia's face was still. I moved to stand beside her close enough that our arms touched. Ready? She murmured. Completely, I said. 30% true. The other 70 was close enough. She opened the presentation, not with data, with a person. At 7:42 on a Tuesday morning, she said, a small restaurant owner in Burnaby is sitting in her car in the parking lot of her own business, trying to figure out if she can make payroll on Friday. She has money in 3 places: Checkwing, Float, HST holding account, and she doesn't know her real number because no single tool shows her all 3 at once. She's been running her restaurant for 6 years. She is not bad at money. She is bad at the systems that were designed without her in mind. The room changed. I felt it happen. Lakeview's senior partner leaned forward. Pens paused on every video screen. Delia made them understand the problem before she showed them the solution. She made software feel like someone had finally been listening. Then she looked at me. My turn. I walked them through the numbers, clean, precise, 2 decimal places. Where the market was underserved. Retention curves. The cohort from Delia's redesigned onboarding. A 21% improvement in week 2 retention. A 17% increase in users connecting a second financial account. Each number earned, each one in service of the story she'd told. She set up the feeling. I proved it. We'd found our rhythm on her couch the night before, and it was still here, steady and unforced. Then Alec raised his hand, politely, the way people do when they've already decided. Really compelling narrative, he said, but I wonder if you're optimizing for the wrong outcome. A privacy-first approach caps monetization significantly. You're leaving data assets untouched. Delia didn't flinch. We're building trust assets instead. That's a nice phrase. It's a measurable one. She clicked forward. Users who trust where their data goes connect an average of 2.3 more financial accounts than users who don't. More accounts means a more complete picture, means higher engagement and higher lifetime value. Privacy isn't a constraint on the model. It is the model. Alex smiled the way he'd probably smiled at her 2 years ago. Delia has always been philosophically committed to this position. There it was, Meridian in a blazer in a boardroom. I stepped forward. The position is supported by the data. I advanced to the final slide. We ran both approaches in beta. Broad data sharing with third parties reduced initial activation cost by 8% and increased user dropout by 31% at day 14. privacy-forward design had a higher acquisition cost and a 63% higher retention rate at 90 days. I let the numbers sit. The math isn't philosophical. Silence. Lakeview's senior partner, a woman named Constance Lau, who had said almost nothing until that moment, looked at Alec, then at Delia, then at the slide. That, she said, is the clearest case for privacy-led monetization I have seen in 18 months of looking at this sector. Alec said nothing else. By noon, Constance had pulled Heather aside for a conversation that lasted 45 minutes. By 12:30, Alec was gone. By 12:45, Heather found us in the small boardroom where she'd sent us to look humble somewhere private and told us Lakeview wanted to schedule a follow-up. Delia turned to me the second the door closed. Her eyes were bright, her hands were shaking slightly, and I reached for them before thinking about it. "We did it," she said. "You did it." "We," she said it firmly, "don't." Then she stepped in and I put my arms around her, right there between the whiteboard and the window with its view of the North Shore Mountains disappearing into low cloud, the rain outside soft and unrelenting the way Vancouver rain always was. "I'm not going to Toronto," she said into my shoulder. My chest stopped. I pulled back enough to see her face. "Delia, don't decide that because of today." "I'm not." Her hands were still in mine. "I'm deciding because that firm has Alec's fingerprints on the offer, and I am done spending years proving myself to someone who decided I was wrong before I opened my mouth." She looked at me steadily. "And I'm deciding because I have a life here that I actually like. My apartment, the food trucks, the Vancouver rain that you refuse to admit is romantic. It's mist. It's romantic mist." A pause. "And there's a man in this office who remembered my grandmother's name from one sentence at a team lunch." She looked at me. That turned out to matter. I didn't say anything for a moment. "You're allowed to respond," she said. "I'm trying to find the right number of decimal places." She laughed, and it cracked something open in my chest. I cupped her face and kissed her. Not brief this time, not a question and not a promise, just the thing itself. Real and unhurried, her hands found my shoulders. Through the glass wall of the boardroom, Pierce walked past, stopped, backed up, and kept walking at speed. Someone else said something indistinct. Pierce's voice, "Mind your business," not a tone that expected to be followed. Delia smiled against my mouth. "Heather is going to have thoughts. Many thoughts, all of them reasonable. There will be a form. Completely worth it." She rested her forehead against mine. "I like you," she said. "A lot, inconveniently. For longer than I let on. 7 months. At least." She pulled back to look at me. "You knew?" "I had a hypothesis." "What was your evidence?" "You gave me the bigger half of your rap last night at the food trucks." She blinked, then laughed, startled real. "You noticed that?" "I notice you. It's the whole problem." Something in her face went warm and settled. "I know," she said quietly. "That's why I stayed." The rest of it happened the way good things do in Vancouver. Quietly, in the rain, without making a production of itself. Heather had thoughts. There was a disclosure form, which Delia signed with the efficiency of someone who had never once been intimidated by paperwork. Pierce apologized for starting the rumor, and then immediately asked whether it counted as a rumor if it turned out to be accurate. Lakeview scheduled the follow-up meeting. Constance told Heather privately that Delia's response to Alec had been the most composed thing she'd witnessed in a Series A meeting that year. Alec never contacted Delia again. The unknown number went quiet. In January, Delia's privacy-led UX framework was cited in a fintech industry newsletter. She came to my desk, set the printout face down, and said, "Don't make it a thing." I turned it over and read it. "You built something real. We're running late for lunch. This is objectively good. If you keep going, I will steal your coffee again. You always steal my coffee. Because you buy terrible coffee as a personality trait." She picked up my cup, took a sip, set it back down with the expression of a woman who had seen suffering up close. "How do you do this to yourself every morning?" Dark roast. Mistake in a cup. I stood up and she stepped in before I could say anything else and kissed me once, quick and easy, the way she did everything, like she'd decided, and that was simply that. I picked up my jacket. She had her hand in mine before we reached the door. I didn't freeze. I just held on.